We will be starting in a minute. Just waiting for one of our panelists to be here, and we'll kick off the side event.
It's okay, it's a long walk. Shall I ask them to come and then we start off?
Hello everyone, good afternoon. We'll start off our panel for this afternoon. So I'm going to invite our panelists for today to please come take these 4 seats in front of the audience. And yeah, yes please. Thank you very much. I will introduce you to our very esteemed panel in just a moment. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to be here at the Pavilion, the World Green Economy Organization Pavilion, who are kindly hosting us for this session. There are many different side events, panels you can be a part of, and you've chosen to be here this afternoon, and we are definitely going to make it worth your while to be here today. And we're here at a very decisive time when it comes to climate action and gender equality, not least because negotiations are ongoing and have been escalated to the ministerial level now on the Gender Action Plan, for instance. My name is Amaya Vijayasinghe. I work as a Climate and Resilience Advisor at CARE International UK. And just to give you an introduction to our session. We're here talking today about the gender-just green jobs that have been promised as a part of the just transition, which has been such a focal topic at COP30 here in Belém, Brazil. But that seems like a lot of jargon, especially if you are not a specialist. So I think it's good to remind ourselves what the just transition rather is. It's the shift away from a fossil fuel-based economy that also at the same time centers the rights and well-being of workers as well as communities who are on the front line in sectors like energy, infrastructure, and agriculture. And it is really thinking about how climate policies can be embedded in measures that are there to secure decent work and meaningful and dignified participation in the workplace. So we've heard that there's a narrative of millions of green jobs, quote unquote, that are going to be created as a result of this just transition. But we are also in a world where we know that there are already existing inequalities due to various systems of oppression, and gender inequality is a lived reality for many women and girls and people of all genders around the world. And there is a risk that if we don't specifically think about how gender equality needs to be addressed in this just transition that we want, that we will end up deepening and making worse the inequalities that already exist. And women are already very underrepresented in energy sector, in infrastructure, in agriculture, and across the workforce. Actually, in the latest World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report in 2025, we see even going beyond just the entry level, that there is a gap in leadership as well. That although women globally, they outperform men in tertiary education, they only hold 29.5% of senior management roles. And so there is, at all levels, structural and agency-related issues that need to be addressed. And CARE has been a part of making these changes for a very long time as well. We have programs across the world. For instance, in Tanzania, we have had the Go Green initiative, which worked with our pioneering village savings model to help women become entrepreneurs for solar energy and for cook stoves, value chains, and they were able to increase income to their households and get loans for further growth through this model. And in many parts of the world, we actually go beyond that kind of technical training to really look at the social norms and discrimination based on a patriarchal system that affect the lives of women and girls. And how can we dismantle these to even allow them to enter something like the renewable energy market in the first place? So we're going from local to global here, and we have an excellent panel to help us do that this afternoon. We're so privileged and honored that they agreed to be with us today. So I will introduce them to you, starting with the gentleman who is on our panel. Thank you very much for being a strong ally. We have Kuda Manjonjo, who is the Just Transition Advisor and lead on transition minerals and green industrialization at PowerShift Africa. We then have next to him Davina Milenche Uwela, who is the Chief Program Coordinator at the African Development Bank Group. Thank you for being here, Davina. We have Shaona Sinalo Kumbani, who is the Principal Economist at the Ministry of Energy in Malawi. Thanks, Shaona. And we have a good friend of CARE as well, Bibile Mokoena, who is the Director for Gender CC South Africa. Thank you so much for being here, Bibile. So really, from local to global, we have strong insights that will come out of this panel today. So first of all, let me hand you the mic, and you can hopefully pass that around. Feel free to listen to each other and come in with comments as well as you want to. Thanks for taking that, Bibile. But maybe I'll start, since we're at COP and we're having governments negotiating things and having ministerial discussions right now. We'll start at the government level with a question to Shauna. So given this context that we're facing right now, Shauna, what are your thoughts on how governments as well as development partners can ensure that this transition to a green economy creates equitable and decent work opportunities for women and girls who already face quite a number of inequalities?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to represent the government of Malawi. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to represent the government of Malawi. Malawi is one of among the countries that is highly affected by climate change and takes into consideration climate action and how it is important to include gender equality. In order to successfully get green, we need to include all aspects, different sectors, including women. This means that we should give opportunity to women, and we shouldn't leave anyone behind. So to answer the question, first of all, I think we should look at our policies, and we should put gender as a gender equality center when formulating our policies. These policies should both be looking at economic policies and also climate change policies. So in all national policies, we should include gender equality or gender mainstreaming. For instance, in the national energy plans, in the NDCs, in the transition plans, we should include gender. So gender should not just be added as an add-on, but should be core. So in this case, in Malawi, actually I'll give you an example of Malawi. Right now, we're in the process of formulating the national energy policy. We're actually reviewing it. So gender has been included as core, especially in terms of formulation, where we're saying that in planning we should include gender mainstreaming at all levels. That is from formulation, implementation, and monitoring. The second point would be, that is also important, is capacity building. Most of the times we might have opportunities for women and girls, but they might not have the skill. So what we need to do is the government and development partners and the private sector need to work together in order to equip women and girls with the right skills, practical skills for the green economy. So, for instance, I can give an example of what a university in Malawi does. It provides training in male-dominated, so-called male-dominated areas, like solar installation. So we need to have more of these trainings in the male-dominated areas, and I could mention a few, like mini grid management. We need more skills in such. The other, before I go to the other point, we should actually be intentional. We should actually be intentional in doing this. So going to the next point, I feel like the other important aspect that we also need to include is financial inclusion. We need to include women and provide finances. We should give access to funds and maybe microfinance in order to cut the barriers in finances for women in technology and businesses. The fourth point, I think we should also focus in our partnerships, like the government should work together with NGOs, private sector, in order to equip women. First of all, we need to understand what the women need and the need of the communities, and have tailored programs for the women according to their needs. We need to localize the needs, and if we work together, we can achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. I guess let's give her a round of applause for those interventions. Set the stage for our discussion really well with those four sort of foundational points that should set the direction of our discussion today. And actually, on the partnerships piece as well as the finance piece, I'm going to segue using that to a question to Davina then to come in for her comments. I'm sure the African Development Bank has had many questions along these lines during these sessions in the last 2 weeks. But can I ask you again, how can the private sector as well as financial institutions sort of actively contribute to this gender just transition that we're looking for? And when it especially comes to women's voice and leadership, their skills, there is such a gap that had already existed in the world, and we're trying to use this framing of climate justice and the just transition to address this gap now. But what are your thoughts on the role of the private sector and financial institutions in this?
Well, thank you very much for inviting us to share opinions on this. Let me say that at the center of this conversation is financing that is going into adaptation, financing that is going into resilience. And clearly you see the gap, and oftentimes that is from the conceptualization, what is adaptation, what is mitigation. speaking from the African context, these are it's coins, I mean, both sides of one coin. There's a lot of adaptation core benefits that bring mitigation, and the other way around. She gave an example of renewable energy opportunities that build resilience. And so if we try to look at it in a holistic sense, we get a full picture on where we need to focus. And I'm happy to say that there has been a shift in the financial sector, that they recognize the business case for adaptation now. And progressively, as we develop metrics and we develop programs, we're going to see an evening out. Because clearly, gender is at the center of this. Because on the African continent, half or even more than 50% of the population are women, more than 60 plus are in the agriculture sector, which is the backbone of most of our economies. So very quickly, what are we doing as the African Development Bank? 10 years ago, just pre-Paris COP, we launched a flagship program called the Financing Action for Women in Africa. It's called AFAWA. That is a 5 billion program, and ideally what it intends to do is to de-risk businesses for women, SMEs all the way across chain. So over the 10 years, what have we seen? We have seen a 20 million line of credit for SME entrepreneurs in Ghana, and that is with the Global Climate Fund. We have seen financing through venture capital, and we've seen also trainings. So over the 10-year period, their power sits on a project portfolio of about $1 billion. So let me just give you a quick run on what we are doing with the bank, specific on funding women enterprises. I think this will give us context on this can be done, and what really needs to be done, or where we need to focus, is on scale. Because ultimately, we know that a lot of grant financing has to be done. We need to do a lot of training, a lot of capacity building. But ultimately, the big money are with the banks, and that's where we need to focus. So let me give you a few examples of where we put money in terms of funding dedicated for women entrepreneurs. So let me start with, I've mentioned AFAWA, and the GCF fund. We have a line of credit, and this is with Fidelity Bank Ghana and Kenya Commercial Bank. This is a $50 million line of credit targeted for women entrepreneurs in agriculture. We have a $50 million financing agreement with the Bank of Industry in Nigeria that has a guarantee facility for women entrepreneurs. Then we have one with South Africa, still with a package of, sorry, let me see the South Africa one. Yeah, South Africa has a total 310, and this is with First Rand Bank. So this is just to give you an indication that there is money in these banking institutions, but the issue is that we are speaking about who's accessing those, how easy or difficult it is to get women projects to be funded by these lines of credit. So we have a lot of money sitting in lines of credit that we push through our intermediaries, and the issue becomes how do we then develop bankable projects that make it to that pipeline. What we do is to ensure that we work with TAs. We have one with the Climate Investment Fund, the CIF, to do training for renewable energy projects for women. That is already as a TA, so that women can start to get into that space. Then what we also do very internally as a bank, so you talked about intentionality. We now have a gender marker on all our projects. You cannot send a project to board without gender indicators. What we have seen that do is all our investment officers are now very conscious on how they design projects that address women, businesses and women actions. I remember before, let me quickly before I stop. I remember before we had the agenda marker, even women investment officers had an issue on how to design women interventions across, for instance, if they're building a grid line. It will be women investment officers, how do I mainstream gender on this grid line? But once the indicator was there, they worked with our gender team colleagues and were able to find indicators and find actions to fund. So intentionality is very important as we drive action. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jabina. Yeah, a round of applause for just so succinctly explaining that as well. And these are decades of programs, and very good to get an idea of the lines of credit and the funding that has been made available. So we've kind of moved through the levels that I mentioned now, but at the end of the day, our ethos and the ethos of many women-led organizations, women's rights organizations, is what you said, is how do we access this funding and use it to ensure that our lives and livelihoods are protected, and that there is space for well-being as well as for prosperity, even at that level, and to keep that going and share that with communities as well that women live in. And I'll come with that question to Dibile, who has been an activist in this space for a very long time. We've heard Dibile about government policies and about financing mechanisms. And when it comes to these two things, what, in your opinion and your experience and expertise, what is really needed and what is the value of investing in we've talked about energy, that's really come up a lot in Just Transition. Infrastructure comes up, but there are sectors actually that are women dominated that have not been recognized or been very marginally recognized in these discussions, like the informal sector or the care economy, women offering so much, trillions of dollars every year worth of childcare, elderly care, domestic work that is not factored into any of these calculations. And that is very important when we think about the just transition and greening our economies, to also bring that work into the transition. But it can be sort of maybe a difficult concept to bring together for some people. So are you able to help us a little bit to understand what is needed and what is the value of thinking about other sectors where women are dominated but their work is undervalued?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invite. I think I'll start by saying, when we talk about care work, informal sector, we're looking at the very lowest at community level. We're looking at the very lowest in the market value chain. Now, these are the people, I'm talking about women, marginalized groups, and persons with disabilities, and also all intersections that are in relation to gender issues. So when policies are made, these are the groups that are excluded. And when we talk about formal and secular economy, this is the economy that is not included in policy formulation, and also they add value. They contribute a lot to the economy. So it is important that when policies are formulated from the beginning, from planning, from the design, these groups have to be involved. Because when you look at the market value chain locally, it is made by these marginalized communities. I think my sister here said a lot about education, training, and building capacity for women, so that they can have confidence to be be in this platform because they can be threatening, you know. So if they are trained, they are given the skills to be able to tell their story, to be able to add value to the processes, then we are getting somewhere. And when it comes to just transition, it is true that it is not only about the energy sources. And I am glad that I am coming now from South African delegation meeting, and I managed to talk to a lady who is leading the just transition. And she was telling me that what they want to find out from here, they want actually a language that will be able to accommodate local communities and not only focus on energy, because that is the focus in South Africa. Our just transition framework is focusing mainly on energy transition, talking about green hydrogen and electrical vehicles. That is meaningless for someone who is at local level, who don't have access to healthcare and who don't have access to water, to food security. And transition has to start there. So what I like about what she said is that they want the social infrastructure to be part of the policy formulation. And what I've discovered from the country is that, you know, training women, capacitating women, and talking about gender responsive green economy policies is not good enough, because those who have to implement them, if they are not trained on gender issues, nothing will happen. So capacity building has to start from the officials as well. Business partners, because everybody has to come on board. They have to be trained on how to have their programs, their plans to be gender responsive. And also when it comes to business, you find that service providers, they don't have a gender component in their service level agreement. So that is important, so that when you have a procurement agreement, you know that it has a gender component. Then we are able to elevate women from the ground, empower them to be able to take part in the mainstream economy. And I think it's also important to collect gender desegregated data of how many men and women are in the green economy mainstream and who is benefiting and how. So, yeah, I think when it comes to really policies, we need to look at how gender sensitive, gender responsive are those policies, because there's no point in talking about inclusion, participation, but you find that when the actual action takes place, the very people who need to be in these policies, who needs to inform these policies, because they might be sitting on the street selling chicken feet or whatever, but they are contributing a lot to the economy. Even those who are doing unpaid care work from home, that is a huge contribution to the economy, to the society. So I think they need to be involved. Thank you. I think I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, a round of applause for Bebile for that powerful intervention. A lot of good points to take home there. And we'll come back to some of those and try to explore them more as well. But with that, Kuda, I think I'll turn to you. You've heard our panelists speak from various perspectives, and you are here as a part of PowerShift Africa, and you are a specialist in the just transition. You've been following the negotiations, I presume, and what's happening at this particular event right now in the context of everything that we've discussed. So could you give us some insights on whether COP30 will help us achieve some of the, to bridge the gap that Bebile has mentioned and others have mentioned in terms of access, capacity, finance? Do you think that there is a chance that we could actually make this transition genuinely gender just?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, first of all. I take this role very seriously. as the son of a single mother, I am so excited to finally speak about gender. I don't get enough chances, and for me, this is the reason I'm in this sector in a lot of ways, to remind myself of the woman who made me who I am, and I'll always speak with a gender lens no matter what it's about. And I think on that point, I am following the negotiations too closely, in my opinion now. Very intense, but also very important. And just to give you an example of why this is important, to relate what's happening, at least in the Just Transition Work Program, and what's happening on the ground around gender. Two big fights. What is gender is coming through again, ridiculously, is becoming another issue. But more importantly, to the issue about green economy. In the Just Transition text, there's a big question about who are the economic actors that are actually going to push the transition. Until we got to the fourth dialogue in Ethiopia, there was not a single mention of cooperatives, of SMEs in that text. It was just primarily private sector. What does that do? What that does, basically, you ignore the biggest employment sector on the continent. So when we think about things like just transition and how we manufacture them, we have to look at the realities of what's in the global south. Cooperatives and SMEs are the backbone of our societies, but our policies still do not reflect that. And a good example of why, for example, we are pushing for what's called the Just Transition Mechanism, the Global Just Transition Mechanism. In South Africa, when they set up the Just Transition Plan for the Mpumalanga region, which provides about 80% of energy, but coal-based energy, there was not a mention of informal economy in that plan until they saw protests from communities to say that you cannot talk about this without us because we rely on the coal miners' salaries for our own informal economies and our SMEs. This is not to say that they wanted coal. That was not their point. Their point is that they were not reflected in the transition. And this is our fight. So what is the promise that can come with a green economy? At Powership Africa, we have what's called the 100% Renewable Energy Program, report. And it speaks about how 5 million jobs can come from renewable energy on the continent, which is 2 million more than any fossil fuel project can do. And that is important. About energy access, it's not just about getting energy. It's about energy and development for the continent. Another big thing that's coming up when you think about just transition is, it seems as if there's this big idea of clean cooking for the global south, which is an important thing, don't get me twisted. But as my mother always says, I just don't care about cooking. I'm also more than that. And we're not reflecting that in the Just Transition text. Women just don't want to clean cook. That's not it. They want energy to give them full lives, and that is important. So we should take the text to say, yes, we are focusing on clean cooking, but that's not, first of all, gas. Clean cooking can come from electrified systems with the mini-grid system that's bringing direct electricity into homes, where women are actually the ones, as you were mentioned before, running the grid systems, mini-grid systems, and that's where the jobs are. The reality is maybe they won't be as high as a return on investment, which unfortunately is how a lot of the projects are being designed, but that does not mean that they're actually not bringing the development. And as a conclusion, I think an important aspect of this, and I'd like to link it with AFAWA that you mentioned. I was going to speak about something else too, which is Mission 300, which is a great program, we think, to actually drive 300 million people on the continent out of the energy poverty. That's a great opportunity, as you mentioned, to have indicators that speak to a gender lens for a lot of the things. What could that gender lens look like? It looks like the trainings for mini-grid systems. It looks at how energy access is actually being used in the homes and to ensure that we're actually doing that result. 50% of Africans do not have transmission lines at least 10 Ks from them. 50%. That basically means our biggest target should also be ensuring that we increase our grid infrastructure. And there's so many jobs in that. And that's linked to, of course, artisanal miners who basically produce a lot of the chrome, the bauxite, which is then used to produce steel. So we really should think about these from that point of view. And my actual conclusion. My favorite story that I always talk about when I look at the Green Valley chains and all of that is how in the Limpopo province in South Africa and in southern Zimbabwe, there are a group of cooperatives of women who trade amongst each other and support each other with artisanal mining of chrome, and they are the backbone of the energy transition as we know it. It's then sold to Chinese middlemen who then take it to China. But they are the beginning of the struggle. But they're still not recognized as actually being part of the value chains. We still want to get a big company to come do the mining there. And they're saying, no, actually, we're quite good at this. Focus on us, support us with technology transfer, and we will drive the transition. But we have to recognize them. And that's why we're here in the Just Transition plans and the gender plans that are being discussed here to ensure that we do recognize people like my mother. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kida. There's an appreciation for sharing your personal as well as professional experiences. That's really valuable. Thank you to our panel for the insights so far. I'm going to ask the audience to be ready with a few questions, if they have any. But I do want to very quickly come back. Want to ask whether other panelists have reflections on each other's interventions, but also to bring us back to the point of why these inequalities on gender exist in the first place, and how some of this work that we're doing now could be leveraged to break down social norms, patriarchal structures, gender discrimination. What do you think are some of the leverage points that are there right now, and also what are the practical ways that we can go about making it easier for women basically to access green jobs? And I would say not at a sector level, but at a sort of relational community level as well.
Thank you, Maya. I think what we are missing here is that raising an awareness and having dialogues, it's not enough. For an example, I think our policies play a key role in terms of can you hear me? In terms of care work, our policies have to be clear about the redistribution of care work. It shouldn't be something that is optional. It has to be something that has to be done by everyone. It is not right, it is not fair that women only have to carry the burden of care work. Because women these days are educated, they are working, they also have careers that they want to focus on. They run business. So when will they have time for care work? So redistribution of care work, it has to be in the policies, in the just transition framework. And then secondly, we need to have policies that push gender responsive budgeting. If we don't budget for gender programs, nothing will take place. No implementation will take place. We also need monitoring and evaluation, gender responsive monitoring and evaluation programs, so that we are able to monitor the interventions that are taking place at local level. Are they making difference? Are we seeing women developing? Are they being successful? Are they being credible business people that can be able to trade even at national level, And what was the other thing? There's something else that I wanted to add. I'll come back to it.
Okay, yes, you can always tell us again when it comes to you. But I'll turn to the audience now, and I think we have time for a couple of questions. Anything that you'd like to bring to our panel today? Yeah, Irene, go ahead, yes. I'm wondering whether there's a different mic that we can give her.
Thank you so much. My name is Irene, and I come from Uganda. I want to talk about the issue of unpaid care work, that like how my sister about. I feel like we need the intersectionality of men also to come into this, to really understand that women, we are not their slaves. We are not, their caretakers. We need to empower them to ensure that when we are at home, they are also co-helpers. They are helping us. When I'm cooking, let him be washing utensils. Like men empowerment is still really needed in this to reduce the unpaid care work at home and in the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more question? Yes.
So when we talk about just transition, there are some sub-industries that women have dominated even in the past. Like, for example, where I come from, there's the basketry and pottery. These are sectors that traditionally have supported women for a long time. And if you look at them, they are climate compatible in the sense that if you make biodegradable baskets, you are supporting, you are depriving the fossil fuel industry of manufacturing plastics, for example. The pottery also reduces the burden on stainless steel and all that kind of manufacturing. So in the just transition, is there a room to focus on primary industries that women can have meaningful economically gainful jobs? Because I hear the discussion you have. There's a gender component of it, but in the just transition, women are not supposed necessarily to fight the gender cards. It's supposed to also be economically empowered. So are we mapping out the sectors that they are strong on so that they can be supported, particularly on those, so that they can gain the parity in economic achievement? Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yes, there's two more questions. We'll take all the questions and then summarize it because I think we're also running short of time. So please make the question brief.
Okay, one question for Kuda. What is the role of men in advancing the gender just green industry? The second one is more so on the policy development, and anybody can answer it. To say that a lot of our policy makers are not gender sensitive and are not necessarily, you find that a lot of the policies are designed by men, engineers, people who've never dealt with the gender space. So how do we make sure that there's a gender lens to policy making, whereas there's no gender specialists in the room most of the time when it comes to policy making?
Thank you. I think my question is also to Kuda. You mentioned that clean cooking doesn't have to come through LPG, but it can come through centralized renewable energy systems. But we also know that now there's an appetite for renewable energy, but the upfront cost is very expensive. So what are some of the things that can be done? Through this, I don't know if it's through the Just Transition Work Program or means that countries can reduce the upfront cost when it comes to renewable energy and all the grid systems.
Okay, we have one more, the last one.
Thank you. Mine will be very quick. Thank you for the panelists. My question will be, how can we move beyond simply adding women to the existing green economy and instead transform the very structures of the green sector to be equitable, inclusive, and just for the ground up? Because I think on Kuda's presentation, I'll just say that the issue isn't the lack of capable women, but the systematic barriers to entry for women in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take it back to the panelists.
Thank you, Marlene. So we've rapidly run out of time, and I'm going to invite maybe a couple of panelists who would like to speak to kind of a summary of all the questions to give us a minute's intervention each, please, as and we'll get some closing remarks from all of you, and we'll have to wrap up. But thank you so much, and I really like the feminist worldview that was put forward for the feminist just transition through that last question as well. So Kuda, over to you.
Thank you so much, and I'll have to rush because I've been called for a negotiation, but I'll push to conclude. The person is political, and that's extremely important. For those who know, my best friend who also happens to be my wife, one big thing is that we coordinate our cooking. I cook Monday, Wednesday, Friday, she cooks the other days. Such a small thing, but that's important. And I'd like to say this to the men. We really think for big solutions, but the personal is political. It starts in the home. With this clean cooking thing, I remember I spoke to the African state leaders with they were pushing it. And I said, when was the last time you cooked? And they laughed. I was like, no, it's important. You're pushing for something and you have not cooked in months. So they cannot speak to something that you do not know about. The point I was trying to make was, and this is linked to the clean cooking part, and why it should not be gas, and why I think we really should focus on renewable energy, and I'll link it to financing. Upfront costs of renewable energy are still expensive because we're still thinking of grand solar farm patriarchal projects that actually lead to us exacerbating the system as we know it. We need to feminize our electrical system. What does that mean? Focusing on distributed energy, because once you distribute energy, that brings economic democracy, and that's important. Imagine if AFDB, through the Sustainable Energy Fund, for example, or AFAWA, provided loans specifically for solar panels in countries that allow for payment back into the solar grid system. That's a genuine way where it is not expensive anymore. You know, South Africa has this policy, Zimbabwe has this policy, Zambia has this policy. But a lot of countries are focusing on big 100 megawatt frameworks. That's not what we need. We need the small ones, and we work on distributed energy. And yeah, I think I should say that to say the role of men, the personal is political. It starts with you and the home.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kuda. And if you do have to run off, feel free. But thank you so much. We'll give him a round of applause, please. All the best. And keep the fight up. Davina, your closing remarks from you?
Right, thank you again. Giving a perspective of a financier, ultimately it aims on, are we able to finance these good intentions? And let me say, we are positive on the journey. We did have the programs that I mentioned 10 years ago. There was nothing gender-specific. We did not have a gender marker 5 years ago. So there's been progress. And just to say that all the work that the gender champions have done, it trickles down. And so we need to keep the momentum. And the small interventions add up. We do the whole spectrum. SME financing, larger infrastructure financing, because one does not preclude the other. We have to be on the same spectrum because Africa needs it all. You're going to start at the bottom and you're going to start on the bigger infrastructure. And we cover that through whether it is AFAWA or our biggest one, that is, he mentioned the Mission 300, which is a large energy program. But we also have a climate-specific window called the Climate Action Window, that looks both at adaptation, mitigation, and technical assistance. So those are some of the programs that we've rolled out that specifically talk to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those practical and large-scale examples. Go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, I just want to agree with the lady there that we do not have gender specialists in policy making. Most of the times, gender specialists are not involved. Not just gender specialists, but women are not. There are not a lot of women in that space in making decisions and policy making. So, what is key is the training that I mentioned earlier. We need to be skilled. We need to have these skills, able to thrive and be part of decision making. It shouldn't just be that we are being added as women, but we need to have those skills, that capacity to be able to make that decision and decisions that make sense. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, exactly. And also that women shouldn't be involved just to be counted as a tick box exercise, but they're also given the space to make decisions, have meaningful participation, and have their voice.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about gender, it's always thinking of a woman. And gender is not about women. Since Beijing Platform 1955, we've been talking about gender equality. But I think the challenge is that we're talking to ourselves as women. When we talk about gender equality, gender equity, men need to be involved so that they can understand where they need to change, where they need to accommodate women. For an example, Garabo, what you said is so true. We work in South Africa with a government on mainstreaming gender into climate change policies. And there were no gender experts involved. And when you ask them about a gender officer, they'll show you a woman. I said, but a man can also be a gender officer, you know? So you find that even if a policy can have a mention of gender or women, but there will be barriers in the implementation because of androcentrism, because of the male order. Those who are taking decisions, those who are making the plans, it's the man with a male pair. So also tokenism, we need to get rid of tokenism, because in South Africa we have a gender balance, especially when it comes to government. But when you look at those women who are in high position, how much work are they doing to push for women empowerment and for gender equity? There isn't much that they are doing. There's no point in having a balance, say we need 10 men, 10 women. Those women, they need to be capacitated in those positions so that they are able to perform at the same level as men. Thank you.
Thank you very much to this panel. I think a massive round of applause for all of them. For Kuda, who's had to leave us as well. But thank you for your time. Thank you for contributing your expertise. This has been an invaluable set of takeaways and a lot of food for thought. And I think, you know, Kuda said something powerful as well. The personal is political. And I think when it comes to gender, that's very clear that we can't approach this with a technical mindset. It's not something that needs to be solved through a mathematical equation or an economic formula. It is something that needs to be led through empathy as well as understanding and really escalating the true power and voice of women and their leadership. And women themselves are doing that already. I think it's time we also just listen to them and do what they're asking for. So thank you so much. Thank you to our audience. And yeah, we'll continue the discussion. The work continues. Thanks.